Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Mover and Gonky show. I am Mover, and you all know my assistant, Gonky, the Navy guy, Hartsock.
It's not what you said before.
It's boss, bro.
Gonky, the boss, Hartsock. And joining us tonight for our show, Rick Abell, who's been on the show before, an amazing American who's done so much. Rick, welcome back.
Thanks very much for having me, as they say in the political world.
Welcome. And you've got Douglas on the DJ.
Doug, how are you?
Is that my job now?
There you go.
Yeah. So today we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to anchor on Rick's experience as Rick. What would you say you did here? For what was?
Well, we got some time, kids. It's gonna be long. Go ahead, Rick.
Well, I started out as a weenie engineer for the Air Force as a civilian, and started out my career in engines, basically. My first one was for a helicopter, which, as I described before to you guys, something I really experienced. Let's put it that way, including trying to fly one, which I gave up on immediately. After that, I got to work on just about every tactical fighter that the Air Force developed from about 64 to when I retired in 97. F-111. It's my first big one, F-15, F-16, A-10, some spook stuff. And I wound up doing the YF-22, YF-23 program as a chief engineer.
That's
and
awesome.
The technical evaluation that wound up with picking the F-22, which I did not do. Nothing I did was good enough for being elevated to picking one, so I didn't. And after that, I got assigned to the C-17, which I spent my last 3 years dealing with Air Mobility Command, which was a completely different experience from all the time I was with the Tactical Air Forces.
That's us now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, the TAF, as they say. And after that, I did a bunch of consulting for all the big airplane companies, telling them what I thought, which was a great job because after I told them what I thought, they could either take it or leave it, and I didn't really care. Not like the old days when I had what the hell I was going to do. So I said, you ought to do this, or what you're doing is okay, and if they like it, great. If they didn't, they cashed the check and moved on.
That's awesome.
And after that, I got a part-time job at Steamboat as a ticket salesman at Steamboat Ski Resort, which is almost as much fun.
A lot of scenery.
Wow.
A lot of scenery. Things to look at.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, they come through there quite frequently, and if I want to engage them,
Still got it. That's awesome.
I feel like I have so much more to do now, Rick.
Say again?
I feel like I have so much more to accomplish in life now.
Yeah, Gonky, you got to get on that, man.
I have no comment on that.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of Gonky, I just want to throw this one up there. This is the kid that, remember the Gonky can't handle this Viper?
I love that video, man.
So Rick, you talked about the engines on the F-16. You had a part in the whole GE Pratt thing, right? We talked about that a little bit last time.
On the F-16? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The problem with the F-100 is, if you guys flew the early versions, was that you got a reputation for flying the engine instead of the airplane because it was very temperamental. And the reason it was very temperamental was it was wound up as tight as you could get it to get the max performance out of it. Unfortunately, when you do that, you get pretty close to the edge of some of the operating restrictions. And you're either having mechanical problems or you're having aerodynamic problems with the engine. And Pratt & Whitney was a somewhat arrogant bunch. They had the contract for the F-15, they had the contract for the F-16. And the fact that their engine wasn't performing up to snuff was kind of irritating to everybody except them. And so the GE guys, on their own money, decided to take the B-1 engine, the F-101, and do some tweaking to it to make it a fighter engine. And it didn't take much because in those days, Pratt would wring every ounce out of an engine you can, and it would be absolutely fantastic when it worked. And it was absolutely horrible when it didn't work. And GE's engines weren't quite as performance, but they were a little better in terms of how they would behave if they got into corners of the envelope. So GE started this program called the Derivative Fighter Engine, DFE, F101 DFE. And they started shopping that around, and somebody had to watch them, so they tapped me for that. And there was about a team of about 3 or 4 guys, program manager, contracts guy, another engineer, and me. And we started figuring out what are they doing down there, and try to get a handle on how this thing could fit in the programs. So the TF-30 and the F-14 was another one that was very good when it was good and horrible when it was bad. And the Navy had a lot of trouble with that engine in the F-14. And so they had squirreled some money away from the Congress to do an evaluation of an alternative engine for the F-14. Well, the Navy is a little different business-wise than we are, or we were. I was, whatever. And they decided that they were just kind of not paying a whole lot of attention to the money. So the program manager, a guy named Joe Wood, very smart guy, he calls up the guys at Naval Air Systems Command at Crystal City. He says, listen, we got this engine down here. It's called the F101 DFE. And we could use a little money to do some exploring with them so we can get them under contract so we can have a bigger influence on them. Because this was all being done by GE on their own dime. So we couldn't really tell them what to do. And so the guy said, well, yeah, we can let you have this, I don't know, $10 million or something like that. And Joe says, well, I'll tell you what, you MIPR it. And what that means is military interdepartmental purchase requests, where money comes from one bag of gold to another bag of gold, and you can do what you want with it. And they said, okay, we'll send it down there. And the next day, this thing shows up. It's a piece of paper. It says, here's the money and the charts and the numbers you got to do and all this kind of hoo-ha. And Joe takes that money, gets it in the Air Force Bank, runs down to Evendale, which is about a 50-minute drive down the road, and puts it on contract. And the next day, the Navy comes up and says, we want the money back. I said, sorry, Charlie, it's gone. They said, no, wait a minute.
Oh, that's
you
awesome.
Can't do that. Well, we did it. And so that's what started the F101 DFE. And then they demonstrated some nice stuff with the thing, and it turned into the F-110. And the F-110 started to be a really serious problem for Pratt & Whitney because it was doing good stuff and it was getting attention. And so then thence commenced the Great Engine War, which is a legendary kind of thing, where the Air Force said to Pratt, you better start fixing your motor or we're coming with this other one and we're going to boot you off this airplane over here. And I said, no, you won't. I said, oh, really? So more money went into the F-110, and pretty soon there was a competition for future production of the F-16 between the F-100, which was a Pratt engine, it was originally built for the F-15, and the F-110 for the what could be the rest of the program. And lo and behold, Pratt got kind of stupid again and kind of didn't pay a whole lot of attention. And the next thing you know, we're buying F-110s to put in F-16. That's awesome. And the rest is history. And then the Navy shows up and says, hey, by the way, we'd like some of those. So yeah, we'll sell them to you. No problem. So they put it into the, I think it was called the F-15D.
14.
F-14 D plus, something like, or the F-14B plus, something like that. I've lost lock. You know, I'm an old guy. I forget. But it really turned out to be better because Pratt got the word and they started fixing the F-100. And in the end, it was a matter of picking which one you want, because they were both doing what they were supposed to do and not doing the things they weren't supposed to do. And there's a guy who worked for me named John Ogg, real sharp kid. Well, he's not a kid anymore. None of us are. And he wrote his thesis on that at MIT about the Great Engine War. If you ever want to get bored for tears about how you can read it. But it's an interesting factual story. And it's part of what the hell's wrong with the programs these days. Competition. Everything is based on, we can save money doing this, and we never do.
So are you keeping up with the F-35 engine stuff? Because it seems like history is repeating itself with Pratt.
It is.
And the engine problems.
It is. The problem that's happening is that there's a bunch of guys, and they're ubiquitous. They just show up. I don't think there's farms grows these guys. It says, if we do this, we're going to save money. And they never do. I mean, we were going to build the F-111, and everybody's going to use it, and we're going to save money. We didn't. And then we said, well, we're going to build F-4s. Well, we save money there because F-4 is a damn good airplane, and it's good for everybody. But it didn't start out that way. The Air Force adapted to the F-4, not vice versa. And the next time it came up was on the Joint Strike Fighter, which said, we can save money by making all these common parts and all this common development and all this common design and all these common pilots and all this common this and all this common that. And you never do. and you can see it now. If you would look at an A, B, and C version of an F-35, I'd be surprised if you see 10% of the parts that are common. I have no idea. Haven't worked on it in a long time. Don't know that. But the whole idea was you were going to save all this money, and you never do. And who am I? I'm just some farm kid out there in Ohio saying, hey, this sounds like a good idea. Why don't we do this? Color. And I said, okay, got it.
Well, Rick.
Yes, sir.
Rick, wasn't the F-111 kind of the first iteration of the Joint Strike Fighter? Like they wanted everyone to use it.
It started out to be two airplanes, two missions, two basic missions. The Air Force wanted a replacement for the Thud. It wanted a supersonic, low-level attack airplane, more like an A-111 than an F-111. And the Navy wanted an airplane that would go out there 10,000 miles and carry 17,000 tons of armament and shoot down the bombers before they released the cruise missiles. Well, neither one of those things are going to fit in the same box, believe it or not. For some strange reason, supersonic on the deck versus a long time sit out there and go whoosh, 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 whoosh. And so it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work, the Navy and Air Force have different missions. And basically, the airplane that is good for a mission is good for a mission. And an airplane isn't good for several different missions. It's just sort of mediocre for all of them.
God, I can't believe you said that last week, actually.
But it feels so nice to have somebody with actual credentials.
Validation. He feels validated. That's why you're the new boss, Gonky. This is why they made you my boss, because
you got the address for sending the check, don't you?
That's right, Rick. Thanks, man.
They're both in Ohio. There's a conspiracy going on. I see it already. A bunch of Ohio boys. Rick, are you from Ohio?
Say again.
You grew up in Ohio?
I grew up in Cincinnati.
That's Kentucky.
I grew up in a small town surrounded by Cincinnati. It was an independent city. So I didn't get tortured, tainted with Cincinnati culture. I tell you a lot of stories about that place too, but that's not airplane talk.
Rick, even the the Kumbaya Mecca Training Center of Eglin was supposed to be like Marines, Air Force, Navy, all trained in F-35, just
That
holding
didn't
hands.
last. That didn't last. They
But it
got
would have
back to
saved
them.
money. It's how it happens.
Yeah, they didn't save much money on that. I still remember the pictures of like everyone shaking hands as they're breaking ground. I'm like, okay. I was just a lieutenant at the time, and I'm like,
Hey, another one
gonna
that
work.
was saving money is the maintenance concept for the F-35, where you got this monstrous big software program that predicts when things are going to fail and they're going to be delivered to the base or the carrier or wherever they're going. And the airplane will come down and the maintenance guy will go out there and say, here it is, box, and zingo, and off he goes again. Bullshit. Ain't working.
Well, I think Mover and I would tell you there's no maintenance program that can keep up with the rate that we can break airplanes. So
That's true. They don't account for us.
no,
I knew that.
They're-
And that's why I said I didn't think it would work.
Rick saw the writing on the wall. He's like, you can't.
these guys
There
are
is no
dumb.
value for pilot. There's
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
no.
I tell you another story. There's a guy named Joe Bob Phillips, and he was probably the world's greatest F-16 pilot. He's deceased now. He's a great guy, and they assigned these guys to the ATF program, Advanced Tactical Fighter program, that I was in charge of the technical stuff. And I asked Joe Bob one time. I said, it's helpful when you airplane drivers every once in a while tell the mechanics just what the hell happened when something bad went on. And so what kind of gauges would you like in the cockpit that could, help the guys out when they get back on the ground? He said, I want one big gauge in there. And it's got a needle and it's got two marks on it. One of them says okay and the other one says eject. That's all I need.
That's actually
That's very valid.
We always used to talk
agree.
about, is it in
I
the green
agree.
or is it not?
Yeah, right.
All the other stuff. I mean, don't make me memorize numbers. Just
No.
green or red. It's fine.
Hey, I can't remember numbers in my air crew for crying out loud. I just get a feel for how fast I'm going.
I used to teach us 3 questions. Can it fly? Can it land? Can it stop? If not, get out. It's pretty simple.
I'm not arguing with it. I just wanted to make the attempt, and it said, I've done my part for the wrench turners, and I knew what the answer was going to be. And it was classic. He said, I would say, okay, eject.
Well, Rick, since we last spoke, which I can't believe it's been 2 years.
Really?
Yeah, there has been like.
Do I look older? Do I look older?
No, you look younger. I don't know how you're doing this, but so
New iPad.
It's the new iPad. Well, last time the camera was like here. He looked like Wilson from Home Improvement. He was just looking over the fence, giving us wisdom. But
Wilson of volleyball.
No, not the volleyball. But so one of the biggest comments, everybody's like, well, how come, the YF-23 has gotten like reignited on the internet.
Yeah.
Everybody's a fan now. Everybody thinks it should have been, it, or even there was talk about bringing it back and making it the 6th gen fighter. I mean, what do you think about all that and all the hype that it's now getting? What is it, 30 years later?
My honest opinion is it's a sexier looking airplane, period. I mean, that's it. You know how fighter pilots are. They go.
Oh, yeah.
These aren't fighter pilots. These are.
I know that. I know that. When you look at the two airplanes side by side, you kind of drool over to 23, and you kind of say, "Oh, that's kind of a neat one over there too." And they just look that way. And the uninitiated and uninformed, but the talkers say, "Why isn't that airplane in the inventory? It's so cool looking." That's the kind of guys you run up against. And I told you this 2 years ago, I guess it was. My job when I was there in the program was to make sure that whatever they chose, it was going to be good for the pilots and the maintainers and the manufacturing people, such that you could pick it based on playing horseshoes in the White House lawn. I didn't care because it would have met the requirements. And the fact that one has a little bit of this and a little bit of that, it's kind of like blondes and brunettes and what have you.
And now we have Fat Amy, which meets none of those requirements. Not a good looking. She's not a
Yeah,
good
it's
looking
not.
girl.
No,
Let me tell you, you'd rather have that than the Boeing entry.
that's true.
That's
That's true. 100%.
That's true.
First time I saw that, I said, I don't think this is going to be a success here. Don't know why. Just a I am. So somebody tacked up the base ops in that Hummer. I don't know. Maybe it was. I had little to do with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly.
I did get a lot of guys coming down saying, why was this program successful? I said, well, the main reason, I think, is that we kept our focus on what was going to be coming out of the full-scale development, not the prototypes. The prototypes, frankly, in my opinion, were a marketing tool. What you really learn about the design, you knew already. Otherwise, you wouldn't have flown the bloody thing. And so to make sure that you were going to have a complete and successful program in FSD or EMD or whatever we called it back then, you had to make sure you were keeping your eyeball on what was going to come out of this that was going to go into the development, the next step. And if you kept focusing on the prototypes, you would lose sight of what they didn't do and forget about it. And then you'll have to do it in EMD. And you're going to waste a lot of money and time because you didn't focus on, let's get these requirements right in the first time. Because if you ask for too much, you aren't going to get it. And you're going to spend a lot of money wasted trying to get it when it wasn't there. So I told him, I said, look, if you want to do it the way you're going to do it, which I think is stupid, but that's okay. You got to keep focused on what do the Marines really need and what can they live with? What's the Navy really need? What can they live with? And what does the Air Force really need? And what can they live with? Now you'll soon find out they all don't go in the same bag. And excuse my French, this stuff about saving all this money in commonality is kind of foolish. But if you keep your focus on what the A model, B model, and C model are really going to do and really have to achieve, you'll be a lot better off than will you be trying to keep everybody in the same box. And I don't know how it happened. I wasn't there. I didn't get hired to do it. I guess I was too expensive. But that's the biggest lesson I could give them when they came and asked me, how did you do this? And I just kept telling them, I said, keep your eye on what the real requirements are, not what these guys are going to do in flight test. And and I'll tell you, one of the reasons that I didn't put any requirements on in flight test, I said, you guys build your airplanes and you can do whatever you want with them. I don't care. And I told Mover this last time. The only requirement on those two airplanes, or those four airplanes actually, was that it has to take off under its own power, period. Doesn't have to come back, doesn't have to land, doesn't have to go very far, take off, fly around the runway, land, and you met the contractual requirement. And so it's up to you to decide what you're going to do with it to prove to yourselves that you can do what you're going to do in the program. And then another thing I told you last time, I did this thing called secret envelope. There were no performance requirements on those airplanes, none, except take off under its own power.
Wow.
I think it was a 2-sentence requirement. No Mach, no sustained G, no P sub S, none of that stuff, period. And I then said, the whole purpose of this is to prove to me and others, and I'm talking about me a lot, that you know what the hell you're doing, and you can prove and you can make happen what you promise. So about a year and a half before the actual flight test, I said, you send me an envelope and you tell me what you're going to do. I don't care what it is. You want to fly 10 miles, circle the pattern, come back and land, and that's it? Fine, good. Now I know they're going to do a lot more, but I didn't have to tell them to do that. So I got this sealed envelope and I said, just send it in. Tell me what you're going to do. Don't care. You want to demonstrate PCBS? Great. You want to do Excel? You want to do this? St. G, whatever. Don't care. Just write it down and give it to me. And they did. And sure enough, they did what they said they were going to do. Those airplanes met what they claimed they were going to do. I said, super. Now I can believe better that you can predict what the end result is going to be before we get too far into this program. And it worked. And so I told them that thing too. I said, you put a requirement on those prototypes, two things are going to happen. They ain't going to make it. You're going to get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Because if it gets to be public, Congress, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Central Ohio publications will come out and say, look how they screwed up. They didn't do what they're supposed to do. Take their money away. Oh, they're bad guys. So you don't tell them. And they did anyway. And they got in trouble. What can I tell you?
I so informed you thusly. I told you guys that.
No.
Real quick intermission. We've got
Sure.
some audience chats. We like to
Okay.
appreciate our audience. James says, hey, Mover, love the channel. I want to ask you to do a sit down with a habitual line crosser. He's an Army Patriot guy. Be cool to see both sides of the Sam. James will do that. Iconic says, hey guys, greetings from Australia. Just wondering, is there a skill ceiling for fighter pilots, or do you just get better and smarter until you eventually retire?
I think it's.
I like to think we do, but no, it's the standard. Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to say that, but Ben says, when it comes to fly-by-wire, am I wrong to think of that as augmentation? Absent those systems, would the planes actually be unflyable? Rick?
Yes, they
It
would.
sounds like, yeah.
It is not augmentation. Fly-by-wire basically means there's no mechanical connection between the stick and the control surfaces. And the fly-by-wire was something that was a very mysterious thing, probably back in the 60s. And we finally, the Air Force Laboratories actually built an airplane. I think it was I can't remember now. Anyway, they did it for fly-by-wire, and the whole idea was you can get rid of a lot of the wiring, control rods, all that kind of stuff. You still have to have the hydraulics because the control surfaces can't be moved by the little electric motors out there. So you got to have the augmentation is basically the way that power goes to this control surfaces. I think that's what the question was.
Hey Rick, what was the first? Sorry,
Beg your pardon?
I was just gonna ask, what was the first airplane did you work on that had fly-by-wire?
I guess the 111.
F-111 was fly-by-wire.
I think it was. I was an engine guy back then. Geez, I'd have to go back and check. I'm not sure.
Didn't you do
It's
some
like a
stuff with the
in another-
YF-17 and the YF-16? Didn't you say you did some stuff with that?
Oh yeah. I was in the engine source selection. Basically,
Yeah.
this YF-16 had the F-100 and the YF-17 had the J-101, which was kind of what we call a leaky turbojet. I wasn't a big fan. I was a little bitty fan.
Leaky
So
turbojet.
I helped with that source selection.
That's your new call sign, Gonky. Leaky turbojet.
Well, F-404 has a bigger fan.
Yeah.
Call sign
Wombat, but not the Wombat. Thank you for all your service, Mover and
Yeah,
Gonky. Thank you
thanks.
for your videos. Watch them all. What's the most advanced AMRAM you guys have ever fired? I know I've never shot an AMRAM. Did you?
No,
I
they shot a couple winders.
yeah, I saw same here, the AIM-9. But yeah, well, thanks for that though. David says, great guess. Only minutes in, this man has me in stitches. A wealth of knowledge with wit and a way with words.
Send the check to the address, please.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David. DL says F-35 equals fat Amy, X-32 fatter Amy, fat cats. So there's that. Thank you for that. And then Connor says, check in for the week. Rick is a legend. We know. That's why we asked him.
That's why he's
Join.
here. That's why
Yeah.
he's-
That's why we already know these things.
Yeah. But thanks, Connor.
Thank you. Yeah. Ethan says hilarious. Will save so much money equals
Yeah.
several trillion.
Yeah.
And then this last one, Rick, what is your opinion of the F4?
It's a great airplane. It's a great airplane. It takes a lot of punishment. It did its job. And basically, unless you had a really bad hit, it'd bring you home every time. It wasn't as rugged as a Thud, but it could do it. I know you guys have probably heard of him, Robin Olds.
Oh, yeah.
You think? I got to know him on a steamboat, and I talked to him about it. I asked him once, and he said, "What's your favorite airplane?" I said, P-51. I said, "Not the P-38," because he flew the P-38 too. He said, "Nah, P-51, that's it." And then I asked him about what was your fifth kill? He says, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Come on, you know that." Because he had 4 confirmed kills in Vietnam. And everybody knows he had a 5th one. So I kept fussing him. He says, "Lots of people ask that question, Sonny, and you ain't going to get the answer either."
Oh, that's awesome.
That is great.
One of my bosses flew the F4, and he was flying at one time on I think it was a FCF, functional check flight. And the engine fell out of the mounts, believe it or not, and was laying in the engine bay. And he flew it back home and landed it, believe it or not. And he may have got the DFC for it, for all I know.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that. I mean, they used the F4 for air to air and air to ground, didn't they?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of like one of the first, right? Maybe multi-role attempts.
Well, you really want to know? The A36 Mustang and the P-51 Mustang, same basic design. One was an attack airplane, one was an air superiority airplane. But the F4 was used both in the north and the south.
Wow. Douglas, you have our B-21 conversation queued up. Let's switch gears and talk about bombers.
Can
do.
do.
We have to?
Do we have? Didn't you? But you know about the B2, so this is the natural progression.
Okay, all right.
Of the next thing, Douglas.
So this is from Popular Science.
You got to add it. There you go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't hit the button. This is from Popular Science. There's a nice picture of the B-21, and they lead in with a paragraph that says that developing stealth aircraft is tricky because you can't talk about them and you can't show them in pictures. And everybody was really excited when we finally got 2 pictures of the B-21 Raider. This picture and that picture. And they go on to speculate in some detail about where the pilots sit, excuse me, based on the ejection hatches.
In the cockpit.
Yeah, right.
That's where they'll be found. You'll find 2 of them in the cockpit.
They sit right underneath these holes. And
so to speak, but standard.
They also spent quite a bit in the article talking about the exhaust ports. And I'm losing my voice, so you guys take over for a second.
All right. Well, it looks exactly like a B2 to me, but smaller than a B2. Yeah. I don't know, Rick. What do you think about the B-21 Raider? Do you have any thoughts having looked at it?
It's basically the same technology as a B2. I mean, it's refined, but it's the difference. I'll give you a comparison. Like the F-117 was Lockheed's first stealth airplane. Actually, it was the first stealth airplane anyplace. And if you look at the F-117 next to the F-22, it's completely different. And the reason for that was that the technology to control the radar return, besides materials, the shaping of the airplane, the analytical tools that they had only could handle flat plates. So they had to make the airplane faceted just to have the ability to predict what the signature is going to be. Now, at the same time that was going on, Northrop was building the Whale, the tacit blue, which is that thing looks like an upside down bathtub. It's I don't know whether you ever seen it or not, but it looks like an upside down bathtub. We called it the whale when we were working on it. And they had a next step in the ability to predict what the radar return was going to be with curved surfaces, which is why when the competition between the Lockheed and Northrop for the B-2 airplane came out, the Lockheed version looked like an overgrown F-117, and the B-2 looked like a more shaped airplane. And it was basically because of the technology ability to predict what the signature is going to be because of the shape. So when you see the B-21, it's just a natural outgrowth of the B-2, and there's probably new manufacturing techniques. There's probably new materials involved, but the characteristics of the way the engines are buried and the way the inlets work, it's not that big a change between the B-21 and the B-2. You can expect, they look shaped differently and they're laying down and all this and that and the other thing. But the fundamentals are pretty much the same. And so I would suspect that the B-21 has a signature that's probably better than the B-2, A, smaller, B, better shaping, better materials. And it's more of an evolutionary thing as opposed to a revolutionary thing. And in speculation of what's it look in the back? Well, it's going to look pretty much the same because the technique to hide the back of the engine is pretty much the same. Unless, and I don't know this, and I hope the guys from the FBI won't be coming in the door.
Run it, mover.
There
it is. You're safe.
Is that one, or
You're
is
safe
it
now, Rick.
This one.
Spill the
this
beans.
one? For legal reasons, this is a joke.
Is that there's only so many ways you can hide the back of an engine, and in order to do that, you don't have to worry about withstanding 3,200 degrees F because it's not afterburning. So I suspect that it looks pretty much like the B-2, which I'm not going to tell you what it looks like.
I feel like they should have put an afterburner on it, though. I mean, aren't we that in the next logical phase? We need to make it go faster. That's all. I think I'm talking to some fighter pilots there. Gotta have more smash. Gotta have more smash. I think faster and more powerful would have been the way. This is why I get crayons and not.
My shirt off now.
Rick, yeah. I've got a question. So,
sure.
With you talk about the evolution of basically the stealth technology. So, I mean, from a cost and engineering standpoint, wouldn't it be easier? And I only ask this from I fought Lear jets with jammers, and Mover and I used to carry jammers, and
oh yeah, sure.
It seems to have relatively the same effect, right? It crushes your opponent's SA and keeps you from getting shot. Sure, so I mean, sure. Couldn't they? I've always wondered, because to take care of that, to do maintenance on all the LO stuff, it's very expensive. So I've always wondered, man, why don't we just put just mad crazy jammer pods that don't sterilize you on these airplanes?
Well, look at it this way: the thing you're trying to prevent is sneaking up on somebody, okay? And if you're jamming, you're sending stuff out for people to see.
Yeah. So
once you get into the actual defeating of an incoming weapon, that's a different problem. I mean, it knows where you are and you're trying to defeat it. You might be able to do that. But the whole idea of the stealth part of it is I want to sneak in here where they can't see me with the long range radars. And they can't see me with the fire control radars until I get pretty close. And the mantra we had in the ATF program was first look, first shot, first kill. So right. I can sneak up on these dudes. And if I'm coming on there with the buzzers going and the blinkers hanging and everything else that confuses him, he knows where you're at. And hell, if he's got 5 missing, he may shoot 5 at you. So it's not so much to defeat the end game as to get the first shot, first look, first shot, first kill. And so when you're coming over from, let's say, Whiteman Air Force Base, you don't want them to know you're coming. Okay? And that's what the stealth does for you. And if you're coming in with your jammer going, they say, what's that like buzz nut on my screen here? And so it's two different problems. And one solution's for this, one solution's for that.
Or if you eject, you may or may not find it until the next day or two. Too soon? Are we? Is it too soon to be tough?
The guy who jumped out of the jump jet, I lost the people when the guy said I lost the airplane in the weather. They're saying, he lost it. It went into the clouds. He didn't know where in the hell it went. That's all.
Yeah.
Not that the airplane got boogered up in the weather.
Yeah. Once you give it back to the taxpayers, anything goes.
Yeah, well,
it's not your problem anymore.
Well, thanks, Rick.
That was Douglas. On that note, we're actually moving. This is a great segue because Doug has an article about the future fighter program poses key test for Air Force's new design methods.
Yep,
Douglas.
Yeah, I read that.
See if I can talk this time.
Yep, you got it.
My voice is mostly back. They're talking about the NGAD and the T7 both, and the articles particularly about advanced digital engineering techniques the Air Force once thought would lead to a revolution in rapid aircraft development, but it hasn't always panned out. They had troubles. They'd actually planned to call the T7 the ET7, which, that's very 21st century of them. Yeah. Then they had a series of missteps and delays that pushed back key milestones on the T7. Some representative, let's see, Heather Penny, senior resident fellow at Mitchell Institute for Aerospace, says it's not a magic wand. It's been around since the 1970s. Computers are better now, but it still missed some big elements of the T7 design, particularly wing rock and aerodynamic instability. So the computers have not saved the day.
Is Heather Penny is that not Lucky Penny?
I do not know.
Is that the same? Isn't that the 9/11 F-16 pilot?
I don't know.
I can Google that while you guys talk about this one.
Yeah, Rick, what do you think about the E designation, and do you think it makes it any faster?
Give it up, will you?
Thank you for that answer, Rick.
Yeah, that's it. Roll
Next
the credits.
question.
Yeah, roll the credits.
Let me tell you, that's another one of those things. We're going to save money, and that's horse crap. I'm sorry, that's not true. Okay. Now, think of the U-2. Okay, revolutionary airplane. Flew in about, I don't know, a year and a half, something like that. That Hummer was designed with slide rules, for crying out loud. Slide rules and drafting boards. Now, the fact that you have better design tools means that basically you're going to save weight because you can get a better understanding of how the materials are going to react under the loads in an airplane. Now, aerodynamically, you'll get a better first cut at what the performance of the airplane is because you have better techniques for figuring out what the drags and lift, yaw moments, pitching moment, all those things that decide how the airplane is going to fly, being in that slider, are also very good. But as Don Rumsfeld once said, and he was made fun of stupidly, was you don't know what you don't know. And everybody thought, oh, that's kind of a stupid saying. And it's not. You know what you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know.
Mr. Dunning and Mr. Kruger would like a word.
Yeah.
Say again?
Dunning-Kruger, yeah.
Well, and so the problem with these guys that come in and say, we got all these new design tools is they cut out a lot of the stuff about the stuff you don't know. And they don't know that. And all of a sudden, you take off and the airplane goes, woo, and that's not good. So you wind up spending some more money that you didn't budget for, spending more time to fix the things that you say, like technology is going to uncover all that crap before we get started. Nonsense. It'll cut out a lot of stuff, but it won't cut out building an airplane and seeing what it does. You put a Harry Hamfist in the cockpit and see what happens.
So wait, Rick, what you're saying, there's no replacement for actual flight testing and flight time.
Absolutely right. I will tell you that some whiz kids came down one time and said, we're going to do this, what was a predecessor to NGAD, and said, we're going to do it a lot faster and a lot cheaper. And I said, listen, the best practice that you can get is to build airplanes. Now, if you really want to make sure that the next airplane you buy in volume and spend a lot of money on, is what you ought to do is let out a few contracts, like every 2 or 3 years, and let the companies build a couple airplanes. And they won't have requirements, they won't have this, but they'll get the practice to build the next airplane by doing that. And it's cheap compared to what you're going to save and what you're going to wind up spending anyway when you buy a common airplane, use technology, smoke dope, whatever. I mean,
Therein lies the problem.
If you were going to build a house, right, you could go out there and say, I want to build a house. And here comes Rick Abell with a fantastic computer program that can show you architectural drawings out the yin yang. And the only house he's built is one for his dog. Okay. That's Rick's aluminum storm door and house building company. Over here is Harry Houdini, who's building houses like popcorn. And he tells you this is what it's going to look like, and it's going to cost you this, and I'll have it done in these number of months. Now, who are you going to buy this thing from? Because I got a real cheap price. See, I don't have any inventory. I don't have any people on my staff. I'll just hire them when they come and I need them. Humma. And there's over here, guys building houses like they're, paper clips. Now, who would you buy a house from? You buy from that guy over there. He knows what he's doing. You can believe him. This guy over here is, smoke coming up. Poof, there's your house. See, look at the drawing. Isn't it great? And put it on your TV, you got TV and he goes around 3Ds and you see where the John is and oh my goodness, there's a man cave. Holy crap. I have some of those. And it's only $1.98. This guy wants $14,000. Go away. That's what happens up there.
So basically practice makes perfect.
Sure. You can cut down on the amount of practice you have to do, but there's no substitute for doing it. And I will tell you that we could have done the F-22, F-23 program without the airplanes. But when we did, it taught those guys some stuff that they hadn't done for a while because there hasn't been any airplane programs for a while. I don't think it was necessary specifically, but that's just me. Because basically, the aerodynamics of airplanes hasn't changed much in a lot of years. They just, the Wright brothers, that was really beginning. Then came World War I, and then came World War II, and then came the jet age. And then pretty soon, airplanes don't go much faster. They don't sustain G much more. They don't roll rate faster. The aerodynamics are pretty much done. Same thing with the innards of the airplane. The materials have changed a little bit, but basically you build them the same way you want. So the practice is what you need to say when you don't know what you don't know, you learn. And then you go out there and you do it for real. Something popped up on my screen. It might be, no, that's okay. So that business of, I got all these magic whiz kid AutoCAD and 3D dimension and blah, blah, zingy. It saves time, it saves money, but it don't save the money you think it does. And as soon as you can shoot all the marketeers, truth will win out. Basically, that was my job. Say, this is what you can have.
Have you considered running for president? Because I will vote for you right now.
I'm too old.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. No.
But mentally, you're sharp. That's where it counts.
In the 21st century, you're not too old to run for president.
Yeah.
Who are you guys? Where'd you come from? What's on my TV?
Yeah. Where am I? Awesome. Well,
So Rick,
segue.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Gonky.
So Rick, so basically what you're saying is ever since airplanes started to be designed by bean counters, they've been subpar.
Absolutely.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's not just my opinion on no-fee ethics.
I tell you, nobody has the guts to come down and say, this ain't going to be cheap, boys. The companies aren't going to do it because they don't want to lie. They don't want to lose.
I mean, is that not essentially what happened with the 737 MAX? I mean, when you look at the history behind that about the bean counters versus the engineers, is that
I will tell you my personal opinion. I've talked to a lot of airline pilots. I know. I said the two crashes that happened shouldn't have happened. All you have to do is disconnect the autopilot, and it wouldn't have crashed. Now, when you sell it to the guys who, you jump in the right-hand seat with $200 total, and they panic, and the captain is going through the checklist on the screen while the airplane's starting to auger in, ain't the airplane's fault. Now, that same problem that happened with those two crashes, according to the guys I talked to, it happened in airline service in the United States, and it was a non-event. Disconnect the autopilot, lower the nose, off we go. And so if anybody really understood what the problem was, they did cut some corners, no question about it, absolutely. But as far as a basic airplane problem, in my opinion, it's just bad training, inexperience. Joe, Commissioner of Health, decides his son got to be a pilot, says, put him in the airplane. We'll buy an airline. Put him in the airplane. Stuff happens.
I'm writing you in for president, just so everybody's aware. Just so
check.
Yeah. Speaking of, we'll talk to the audience real quick. Manley says, Mover loves the channel. Did you ever comment on the 2022 R44 crash in Texas where the main rotor blade made contact with the tail? That is a horrific video. We haven't talked about it. I don't know if the AIB report is out, but it's definitely something. Mass bumping is always a thing. There's always mechanical failure stuff. There's a lot of moving parts on a helicopter, as Rick has said. And there's a better than average chance that they all start moving at the same speed instantaneously. So it's very dangerous. Charles, thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
And then Pedro says, my dad used to fly the English Electric Lightning back in the late 60s before moving on to Jaguars in the RAF. Do you guys consider there would ever be a flying Lightning again?
That's a cool plane.
It is. I saw one at the RAF Museum at Hendon. Really neat airplane.
Yeah.
Vertical engines.
We had shoes on. Was it the Avro? Was it the Vulcan?
That's the bomber.
The bomber, yeah. So we had shoes on, and he talked about doing an intercept with an F-14, and it made like the entire country mad. Because they're like, there's about the time we bombed the United States twice. Like they would just like so mad about that. They take their bombers seriously over there. Kennard Swee says, love this show. I'm in the wrong time zone for the live event, but we'll catch up on the rerun. Thank you. And then Aaron says, happy to be watching live again. What effects do you think AI will have on the future aircraft development as well as stealth detection technology? Ooh. Rick?
Yeah.
I think AI will have a bad effect. Just like I've been talking about all this design stuff, people will start believing you can cut corners, miss things, do all this kind of stuff, and all you got to do is ask the computer, say, Watson, what should the airfoil shape be? And it'll come out and give you some stuff, and there you be. I think that's hooey. Now, if you're talking about threats sorting, things like that, prioritizing targets, that might be very useful. Don't know that. But basically, anything that's involved with safety of flight or killing bad guys and not dying, I'd keep away from it myself.
Hell yeah. Oh yeah.
I like that.
The Rick versus Elon Musk cage match. When can we expect that now? Since you're anti-AI.
I honestly think he would agree with what I just said.
Yeah, I think he would too.
I think he'd kick his ass. That's my personal opinion. I still think you'd kick his ass. So,
well, I sure ain't gonna bet him. I sure ain't gonna bet him at the table.
He's lucky. He's lucky he agrees with you. Is all I've got to say. Connor says, curious what Rick's opinion on the Su-57. That's actually the threat. We're going to save that one for later because that is the threat of the day. We're going to brief here in a little bit. And then Ethan says, biggest feature NGAD apparently needs is auto RTB. ET phone home. Technophasal says Russians produce equivalent jets at 10% the cost. That's fair.
Let me make an observation about that.
Go ahead.
I was back when I was working engines. And I guess you guys know about red hats. If you don't, I'm not going to get into it. But anyway, we exploited Russian technology, one of which was engines. And the Russian design philosophy is to have an airplane that a farmer can maintain. And if it's useful in combat, that's better. And so the engine, and by analogy, the airframe, are very crude, simple things, and they do not make the performance of any free world airplane. But they're cheap, and you can throw them away, and you can do that. So I had this general one time say, why can't we make engines like the Russians do? And I said, we can. There's no problem with all that. However, you want to go faster than them, turn harder than them, sustain G longer than them, and have the engine last a long time. Now, that's what you want. That's what you've told me you want, and that's what I'm giving you. Now, if you want one that craps out in 100 hours, you throw it in the trash heap, and it doesn't push your airplane as fast, you don't get as much smash, your sustained G is 3, fine, we can do that, no problem. And he said, oh, you're talking about, kid. I said, I guess I better leave now. But that's basically the right. It's not 10% either, by any stretch of the imagination. Wow. But it is cheaper, but it's not as good, and it don't last very long. Now, if you want it to last a long time, it's going to cost more. If you want it to perform to its maximum capability, it's going to cost more. And if you don't, it costs less.
Well, we do have an article about something that didn't last very long and costs a lot of money, aka the F-22. But we'll get to that in a second.
I can tell you why that is, too.
Yeah. But John has said, thanks for the great content. Here's my contribution to the Rick for President campaign.
Rick, you got 3 votes, man. You got 3.
Yeah, you're
just getting started.
Hey, I'm going to make the next debate.
I don't think they can handle you. I think
too smart.
They would mute your mic before once you start making people look bad. Douglas, you're up, sir.
Okay, next. We've got an article from Breaking Defense. The F-35 completed a key combat simulation on September 21st. I almost said 21st, known as Runs for Score, which I suspect Rick can enlighten us about. They've had 900 F-35s produced. The program has technically been stuck in its initial operation testing phase for years over delayed completion of the trials. Apparently, this moves it to the next stage.
Mm-hmm.
It's expected to achieve FRP at the end. It was expected to achieve FRP at the end of 2019. And let's see, the trial results from the trial could show need for retrofits to address possible shortcomings. I think that's most of it right there.
Okay.
Go back up where it says retrofit malpractice. Or,
Right here. Acquisition malpractice.
Acquisition malpractice.
Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall was asked whether he envisioned such changes being necessary based on JSE results. Kendall, who once described the F-35 production plan as an acquisition malpractice, praised the F-35 in response. He's changed his opinion. It's light years ahead of
I wonder
fourth
how
generation.
that happened.
Yeah.
He moved from DOD to USAF.
Yeah.
Well,
strange.
I
So
know,
Rick,
Frank.
what does all this mean?
Well, I don't know whether you guys are familiar with OT&E, but that's operational test and effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a separate organization called OT&E in the Department of Defense. And basically what they do is once there's been sufficient assets produced, they can be tanks, trucks, submarines, whatever, they compare what the device is capable of doing versus what the service had said it needed to do in the operational requirements document in the Air Force. I don't know what the Navy calls it. But the DOT&E, the director of OT&E, is a guy who is set up to say, guy or girl, pardon me, that this airplane meets all the requirements, so now we can buy a whole bunch of them. And that's what goes into full rate production. And so when you first start the development program, you have two key milestones. Well, yeah, I guess you have three. The first is let's start and develop it. The second is decide to go into low rate initial production. And the third is to go into full rate production. And the first one is kind of a paper pushing exercise to say, you know what you're doing. The money is pretty reasonable. Godsmith uns, and off we go. And then you go through the flight test program and allow why does your, never mind, I'll get to that later. It says you have done what you said you were going to do. It meets the ORD, or it meets the specification, and therefore we can buy some of them to actually give them to the guys who are going to fly and fight them. And the third rate is what's called OT&E, Operational Test and Evaluation. And what that means is they go out and they fight a war with an airplane or a tank or a boat or whatever. And the DOT&E guy gets up and says, guy, girl, gets up and says, yes, this does meet what the service asked for in terms of warfighting capability. And so therefore you can buy a bunch of them. So what that said was that the F-35s, I guess, is allowed to go into full rate production because it does meet what the services asked for. I mean, if that's what it said, I'm not sure what exactly the situation is. And it's up to that individual to make the recommendation to the Secretary of Defense to say, now I'll tell you a couple of funny stories about that. When we had the F-22 and we started the development program, the OT&E guys come pounding down to Right Pitiful and said, we need a ton of money. And we said, well, what for? He said, well, we have to replicate the integrated air defense system of the Eastern European scenario. We said, you what? And basically what they wanted to do was take the Warsaw Pact defense system, air defense system, and build another one out there in Holloman or someplace so they could test the airplane against it. And we said, what? You guys go away, please. And after a lot of negotiations and saner heads intervened, we said, well, here's the things we can do, which is some of the stuff they're doing on that airplane, using simulation, using models, using captured assets, whatever they're going to use to test against the actual airplane is flying. And I suspect that what they did was come up with a whole bunch of scenarios where a bunch of A's come in and a bunch of C's are doing this and the B's are launching offshore and everybody's going to do it and we're going to do blah, 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 blah. And through simulations and actual running against captured assets or duplicate assets or things like that, they have shown, or not, I don't know what the answer was, that it does in fact do what the services had asked it to do. Now, in the end, reality lays its head and it says, look, we're a little short here, we're a little short there, but it's still a good airplane. And we should do it anyway. And then, oh, by the way, all the people that are working on these things need money and they like to have jobs and what have you, so we're going to do it anyway. Now, if it's a real flop, like the A12, it will get canceled. No question about it. But you can't fight World War III with the airplanes to prove that they can win World War III. It's as simple as that. So you got to use a lot of that stuff. Now, Frank Kendall at one time was in the Department of Defense development part of the business, not in the services part of the business. And I suspect when he said that, he was in that part of the Department of Defense. And he may or may not have been true. I don't know. I've never read it. I know Frank, but when he got the job as the Secretary of the Air Force, he ain't going to turn around and say, well, boy, I got a crummy program here. Let's cancel it. Ain't going to happen. So the fact that that guy said that, I said, that's no human nature. I mean, you're put in the job to make sure you're going to get the product that somebody asked for. And if you believe it's the product is good enough now, you'll say that. Why not? So all that stuff that they were talking about is all those simulations and wargaming and you name it, to prove that the services are going to get what they wanted. May not be what they need, and that's another story, that the services really don't know what they're going to do with the airplane when they ask for it, because the situation changes, the airplane does different things, and when pilots get their hands on it, they develop new tactics. And so the fact that they said in the operation requirement document, it's got to do A, B, C, D, E, turns out that, yeah, A, B, C is pretty good. D, we don't need anymore, but here's F, G, H, and I that we can do now. We're going to do that instead. And that's what you guys do in tactics development. And so therefore, the fact that you say it meets the ORD may or may not be actually relevant, but it is the law. And it is a law. It's a public law that says this guy, this woman, this person has to say that this meets what the services ask for, or it has these following shortcomings that must be remedied, or it has these following shortcomings which are acceptable. And until they do that, you can't ramp up production into the rate that you want it. Is that good enough?
That's amazing. I have nothing to say. Gonky, do you have anything? I mean, I'm sitting here just.
No, my head hurts.
I'm learning.
I'll give you a story. The director of OT, a good friend of mine, he was talking about the F-35C. He was long after he was out of his job, and he said, you know, Rick, the AV-8B has never taken off vertically with a full combat load. It never will, even though it's supposed to. He said, now that's a prime example of what the Marines think they need, but they can't have, and make do with what they got. I said, yeah, I know that. Pilots come in and say, we want this, we want that, we want this. Because the marketeer's been down there buying them beers and telling them, you know, we got this super sexy whiz-gangy, and if you buy our plane, we're going to give you this. And my job all the time was to say, well, yeah, you can have that, or no, you can't. I mean, it ain't going to happen. I'm sorry. I remember one guy, he had his cockpit display in his airplane. I'm not going to mention who it was or which one. In his cockpit display, he had every threat in the Eastern Hemisphere. It was going to see them all, identify them all, tell you, and route your path so you can get through all these guys, and it's going to work perfectly. And the guys, you know, the fangs came out and the drool started going, and everybody's going, yeah, we got to have this, we got to have this. I said, ain't going to happen, guys. Come on. Well, they told me it was. Yeah, right. Did you ever buy a car? Did you ever listen to the sales? Was it really like that? Can you really figure out airplay in your car? So, like I said, this whole thing of evaluating the airplane is a critical step in the whole development and production of the airplane. And that's what they're really talking about.
Wow. All right. Well, I got Doug. Segue. We're right into the next one. Hold on, I got to change the banner. Keeping the F-22s alive has become problematic.
So they're talking about what looks like operational problems with the F-22. The Air Force is planning to reduce its inventory of F-22 fighter jets within fiscal 2024 budget. They requested to phase out several Block 20 F-22s. They're going to put 32 of their 185 F-22s into storage, even though they're not yet 30 years old. They've been having difficulties in real life with operational costs and maintenance challenges. Also have had difficulty integrating it with new weapons, particularly the F-35, and that they're concerned that it might in fact be too costly, although it says costly here. I'm not sure if that's the same thing. It may be too costly to upgrade it, so they're just going to have the money rededicated to the NGAD program.
Is 30 years realistic? I mean, did you guys like when you were doing all this, were you like, this jet will be around for 30 years?
Nope, absolutely not. 20 years.
Is that standard? Is the 20-year?
What's the rules back when I was in charge? But I don't know what it is now, to be honest with you.
What do you
forever?
What do you think changed as far as, I mean, I know they cut the order, right? That was a big thing.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you what actually happened, okay? We had laid out the production program, or the development program and the production program based on a certain schedule. And that had a certain funding profile. Now, the first thing that happened is after we went on contract, Congress says we need this money to do something else. I don't know what it was, sure wasn't paying me money. But anyway, they cut the budget significantly. And then they did it again in the next year. Well, when you do that, the first thing that happens is it takes longer and it costs more money. Because you got to keep the designers, the engineers, the maintenance people, the logisticians, the finance guys, and everybody else on board during that period when you aren't building the airplane. And so you got an extra period of time where you're actually using people to do work, but you aren't producing any product. And so when the funding profile kind of went, it goes up, and then they cut back on the engineers because the engineering's done. They cut back on this and they cut back on that because you're in production and the funding looks like this. Then it takes off again when you're actually buying airplanes. Well, what happened was when they stretched it, it went like this. And then started to taper down. Well, because it stayed high spending, Congress got upset again. I said, it was your fault. Well, they're going to listen to me. Of course they are. And then, so the money ran out. And then somebody decided in Congress, I think, that the Warsaw Pact was not a big deal anymore. And we don't need this thing to go busting through the FIBA and shooting the guys down in their backyard. So we don't need them anymore. End of story. That was it. And that's why they only built 182 airplanes. Started out 750, went down to 500, then it went down to 432, something like that. But the airplane basically did what it's supposed to do. And the ones that are going to retire, it costs too much to upgrade them because they were trainers, basically. You go from lead-in fighters to you go to these things, and you go to the actual operational squadron.
Yeah, those are the ones that were at Tyndall or Eglin. And Tyndall. That's the jets we flew against Gonky.
Mm-hmm. So you can, and I'll tell you another thing that happened. They're talking about the avionics. there's another save money. We were in the development during the before the full-scale development started. Now, somebody up in Fort Fumble had this brilliant idea that we can use these common modules for the RAH-66, the Army stealth helicopter,
Yeah.
the Navy's A-12, and the Air Force's advanced tactical fighter. And all I have to do is change the software and they can do whatever they want with them. But they'll be kind of like iPads and you can put whatever you want on them. I said, you guys are nuts. So basically what we did was form this thing, what was it called? Some screwy name, where the Army, Navy, and Air Force all got together and met periodically to decide what these common modules look like. So I told my boss, now the way we're going to get away with this is we're going to ignore them. And we're going to send some people up there to play with them. And we're going to keep the baseball back here at right pedal. He said, how are you going to do that? I said, well, we can't tell the contractors what to do because this is a DEMVAL program and they don't have any requirements. So we're going to just sort of say, pay attention to those guys, but not a lot. But these guys started hearing mumbles from Fort Fumble that unless you do that, we're going to take your money away. And and so the contractor started playing, well, we got to get common modules. And so we had this tussle all the time about do the ones we need for our problem and minimize the expenditures on these other things because they ain't going to work. And eventually the A-12 vanished and the RAH-66 vanished and we were the only ones left. And we wasted a lot of money, but it was going to save money, but we wasted a lot of money. But anyway, so anytime you do that, you lock yourself into a system that is not easily upgraded because somebody's going to have a new requirement over here, somebody's going to have a new requirement over there, somebody's going to have a new requirement over there, and they're going to diverge anyway, so why not start in the first place? But it hampered the development of the computing system in the airplane, and it's just too expensive to put a new one in. That's as simple as that.
Yeah. Too expensive to upgrade. You can't, we just don't have the money anymore.
Maintenance, it's a burden you're going to have to pay if you want to have an invisible airplane. I'm sorry.
It's invisible, Gonky.
Can't see it, but it's right there.
You can't see it. Speaking of invisible aircraft,
yes.
Douglas, our threat brief for today is the Su-57, aka used to be the PACFA. What do you got for us?
Oh, we got a nice picture of the Su-57. Do you want me to read
it looks
this?
like a YF-23.
It
sure does.
Kind of like it, doesn't it? Country of origin, Russia. Entered service 2022. Crew 1. Length 22 meters. Wingspan 14 meters. We get to start getting these in feet, man.
It's in commie units because it's a commie jet.
Maximum speed 2,600 kilometers per hour. That sounds like a lot. Rick, can you do those in your head?
Well, kilometer, 0.6 of a mile.
Oh, no.
Dude, he's
2x. It doesn't have thrust specs on it. Maybe
test.
we don't know that.
This is the test.
Is it in the Newton meters?
Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
looking for anything else
right.
interesting. Two large internal weapon bays mounted tandem between the engines for stealth, I'm assuming.
This is less visible to radars than the previous generation. Hold on. Where you scroll down?
Okay.
Keep going.
That's about it.
It's stealthy, right? So it has a 0.1, which is less visible than the previous Russian fighters. However, it loses badly to the F-22 Raptor and F-35. There's talk about its super cruise is like ridiculous, like almost high 1 point something, 2.0, which seems unverified to me, but
full roar.
Yeah. The thing about it, I did a video on this and got the whole internet mad at me. Seems like a trend. So, it does a whole bunch of air show stuff. We've seen it in Top Gun Maverick, where a Tomcats defeats the Su-57. it's looks a lot like a YF-23, but there aren't a whole lot of operational, like IOC jets, not prototype, but actual in squadrons operational airplanes, and they're having trouble building them. We did have an article, which I won't read, but they're talking about they're getting more Su-57s and Su-35s, but it's very hard for them to produce right now because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. So, Rick, what do you think? I mean, just looking at it, having the YF-23 stuff, I mean, does it look familiar to you?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like the Tu-50 and a B-29, you know. And if you put enough pictures up, you can copy it. I know zero about the airplane. I do know about Russian airplanes, and they are somewhat formidable. But A, they don't last very long. B, they're very hard to keep operational, and C, they never do what they're supposed to do. So all that stuff you talked about, I would say, talk again about the guy who's got a 3D model of your house versus the guy that's actually got a whole bunch of them built.
Rick, is there anything like, is there like, as an engineer, like just looking at the airplane, like, is there anything that stands out in your mind? Like, you know,
I couldn't really see a good picture, to be honest, but I assume
like the exposed rivets. I mean, you can actually see
the Russians have a design book, I would guess, and if the rivets are out of the boundary layer, they are not flush rivets, believe it or not. So in the front of the airplane, they're usually pretty flush, but when you start to get back where the air transitions to the turbulent boundary layer, it doesn't really matter that they're flush or not, so they don't use them because they're expensive. So it looks like they use the same internal design to mask the front of the engine, but they put a round nozzle in the back. So if you get behind him, he's dead meat.
But he's got thrust vectoring, so he can do he
does. I can't tell. Is it rectangular
Yeah.
nozzles or round ones?
They're round. I think they're round. Doug, is there a
Yeah, I'm 99% sure they're round.
Yeah.
There's no back view in that article, but I can go looking for one.
Thinking back to Top Gun Maverick, pretty sure they're.
Yeah, if you look at the documentary,
there it is.
There you go.
As opposed to,
the
let me see if
square.
I can find it.
Now, like I said, if you get in his hindquarters,
that's the YF-23.
Yeah.
Go back, Doug. Go back to the other one.
Which, let's see, this one?
The one you were just on. There you go.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he well, it looks like it's 22 from the platform.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always wondered, you know, I mean, just as an operator, I'm like, oh, it's got small tails. It probably can't maneuver very well. But then, you know, it must have a decent fly-by-wire control system because it is pretty maneuverable.
You gotta have surface area. I don't care what you're using, push rods or fly-by-wire.
Yeah, but look at the leading edge. Like, I don't know what you'd call that. That the roots, those things look movable. So it looks like it's biting into the air. Yeah, right by the leading edge extensions, right there where the wing root comes together. It looks like those move.
Yeah, maybe canards. I don't know.
Yeah, it looks like it's got a whole lot of high alpha capability. But you know, flanker's got the wanker. I don't know. They always put the wanker back there.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I tell you,
Hurst up there too.
Talking about that thing brings up a story on 111. There was a problem with the thing. It would not go supersonic on the deck. Okay, you're not supposed to do 1-2 on the deck. And one of the things that GD kept saying was it's the problem with the engine nozzles, and we need a larger tail cone so that we can flow the streamlines back in the airplane and not have separation and drag back there. I said, "Come on, guys, get real." And we go round and round and round. And so they built a whole series of stingers. I mean, long ones, short ones. One of them was, I think, about 6 feet long, I swear, sticking behind the airplane. And none of them made a hill of beans because the air was separated back there anyway. So streamlining wasn't going to do anything because the air wasn't going to be streamlined. So the net result is they took the big long one and cut it off flat at the back of the airplane. And there's a big flat plate back there. And that's where the fuel dump is. And I swear I was, Lenny Schreiber was the guy that kept nagging me about this. I was swearing when he passes away, I'm going to get that 6-foot long tail thing and put it on his tombstone. But the Aussies have a great chick. They finally retired their 111s, but in their air shows, they would open that fuel dump back in the back of the airplane and light the burners, and this big long flame would come flying out of the back.
Yeah.
Fantastic air show thing.
It'll do it in the Hornet too, but not on purpose. That was a Fresno mishap. Remember that, Gonky, where the dude
be high alpha? Yeah,
he was going over the top or something.
Yeah.
He hit the fuel dump, and the Viper guy said, "Eject, eject! You're on fire."
Yeah,
like, sure, I'm out. See you later.
Yeah, he had the dumps on to lighten up on the way out, and he forgot to turn them off.
No, I thought his flight suit caught it. No, I thought that because they put out this thing. They're like, "Hey guys, stop rolling up your sleeves." We'll talk about that in a minute in our mental health minute.
Dude, I went out the airplane and I literally put my hands on the throttle and I pulled my flight suit down. Like, dude, what? It's not the flight suit I'm wearing. There's no way it reaches.
Normalization of deviance, Gonky. That's what you're doing here. All right. Moving on to what we got. Somebody from the audience. It says, Aaron says, I feel like necessity and good competition between the companies bidding for it build the best aircraft. The only problem after that is paying for it. What do you think, Rick? Is that
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'll tell you what I think he said. The competition, is basically to make sure that you have a choice when the competition is over. And it is a realistic requirement. The problem after that is that if you haven't budgeted for the problems that you know you're going to have, you start to exceed your development budget in this competition. And then it's like a snowball running downhill. You guys can't do what you said you're going to do for the money you wanted. So therefore your production money is insufficient. Therefore, we got to stretch it out. Therefore, you ain't going to get, and it's just a big snowball that keeps going and going and going. And the only way you can actually do that, and this is based on my experience, and it's something I got away with because nobody tried to stop me because they didn't know what I was doing, is to not set any requirements. So when somebody comes down and says, it's not doing what it's supposed to, I said, well, A, there isn't any requirement, and B, this isn't the airplane we're going to buy. And C, look how we have been changing the requirements as we learn things so that when we start, we'll know what we're doing and we have a realistic chance of achieving it. Now, the fact that Congress always has uses for your money, and I'm talking about the services, you and me, they always have uses for your money. And part of a good program manager is ability to sell his program so they don't take your money, they take the other guy's money, which is like what I said about the F-101 DFE. You got to be smart enough to start using their money so you can use your money for what you need. And so paying for it, if you're realistic and you have a good budget and a good schedule and you've done your homework, as long as you stay within shouting distance of what you promised you were going to spend, there is no problem. Unless somebody gets a wild hair and saying, we got to do such and such and what enough, and et cetera, and we don't have any money. But that never seems to be a problem because they just print more. See, I could be president.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. I'm voting for you. Gonky is vice president.
Oh, no.
Hey, I pick him.
That's
right.
Still waiting for the check.
Gonky has gone to the post office. So we've got some voice messages. This is a new thing. You didn't get this last time, Rick. We've actually got people that leave us messages.
Okay.
And so here we go.
No, I don't want to increase my automobile warranty.
Yeah, sir. We've been reaching you about your extended warranty. So we put that little guy up there, and let's hope this works.
Hey guys, your weekly BC voice message is here again. It's a short one this week. As fighter pilots and commercial pilots, you have seen tons of different airfields. I'm wondering if there were any airfields you just didn't like or even dreaded going there because of the amount of traffic, winds, short runways, or something along those lines. Till next week, best regards, BC.
Okay.
I'd say CVN 72, 4, 6. Those come to mind.
All those damn short, crooked runways.
And they just keep moving. Dude. I mean, how you try to line up with it and it moves.
Orange County, LaGuardia,
Midway. I don't like Midway.
Midway, Chicago.
Yeah, dude. It's like
we don't go there. We go to
everything
O'Hare.
intersections.
O'Hare, it's just the 3-hour taxi back that, if you land on the outer runway, it's like, good Lord, dude, the flight was easy. It was the taxiing that was a pain. Rick, you're an avid aviator. Do you have any airfields that you're like, yeah, although I guess you get to pick when you're just flying for funsies.
Yep, I do. No, I don't like flying into Midway in the back of the boat. I will admit that. And I really love landing on CVN 64. That was a trip.
That'd be CV 64 right there. There's
no
boy.
CV 64. Yeah. I'll go get my hat here in a minute and show you. I got a VIP hat. Got to meet the captain, not at the captain's mast either. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thanks for that. All right, moving on to the next one. This one's about air show mishaps.
Hey guys, huge fan of the show. As a lover of aviation, I've been going to air shows for the last 10, 15 years. And I love seeing the different aircraft and the warbirds and the demo teams, and even the little extra pilots, and they do some crazy stuff. It seems like since COVID-19, we've had more and more, crashes or mishaps involving air shows. I mean, even just this year. I guess my main question is, do you think that there is something that is causing that, or there's a reason those have been happening seemingly more frequently? And do you think that there's a possibility that the FAA will eventually say just no more air shows overall? Thanks again. Huge fan. I appreciate your guys' content as well as your mental health minute. It means a lot.
No. There's more air shows, right? So COVID, we didn't have any air shows. Now we have more, and they're older jets. The jets are just getting older and older and older.
I kind of see what he's saying.
Yeah.
Like pre-Rona compared to post, which...
Oh boy, we're gonna get demonetized, Gonky. Here we go.
No.
Gonky's getting us banned from the YouTubes.
No. I mean, I understand his question. I think it's just bad luck. Maybe that's naive to think that, but I agree. It does seem like there's more incidents.
Rick,
but I don't think the FAA will ever ban air shows.
Rick, what do you think? You think it's statistically because the jets are getting older, pilots are getting older? There's not the pilots, but we're dealing with warbirds that are now 70, 80 years old.
Well, one of my pet theories is that things are just about the same as they always have been, except there's more ways you can learn about them with social media.
That's true too.
And as far as the airplanes are concerned, if you maintain an airplane correctly, they're basically infinite life. Now, you may wind up with just one rivet that has not been replaced by the time you retire the airplane.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean by maintaining it correctly. And the recent MiG that went in, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I would not be surprised that the quality of the airframe itself and the quality of the engine itself and the control systems, et cetera, is generally subpar compared to US or free world type equipment. And so in that instance, it may be a problem with maintenance of the equipment because you're not sure what it is. You don't really have a manual. You don't really have a depot. You don't really have tools. And so you got a fairly cheap product to start with and not detailed knowledge as to how to actually maintain the airplane. And I don't know what happened. I have no clue to that.
Yeah.
But I have this thing in the back of my head, at least for foreign airplanes of dubious heritage, you got to be extremely careful of them because they ain't the best pieces of iron flying around.
Yeah.
As far as do we have more now than we're not? I don't think so. And if you do, it gets publicized a lot more, so a lot more people are knowledgeable about it, and it gets to be a big brouhaha.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember them in the past, especially as a kid. You'd see it on the news, air show crash, and then that's the end of it. You might get 2 news cycles out of it, and then you never hear about it again.
Versus, if you did a paper that week,
right? Versus here, now we have the footage of it, then we have the new angle of it, then we have the pilot speaks out and the backseater speaks out, and then all the channels pick that up, and it stays in the news cycle. You're right, it stays in the news cycle a lot longer. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's a risk of them getting rid of it, but I could see them tightening down on what can be, what gets the exhibition category, what can be used as at an air show. To your point, Rick, are you going to allow that 30 or 40-year-old Russian aircraft that only had a life cycle of 10 years to fly over these populated areas? I don't know.
Beats me. I'm glad I'm not working there.
Yeah, well, you'd be getting a paycheck, though. You'd be getting a paycheck as a
government
employee.
Paycheck.
Yeah.
Where's
you get a paycheck. They pay real well. All right, one more. Here we go. And begin.
Hey, Mover. Hey, Gonky. Just wanted to say thank you guys for the content that you give every week. You've helped inspire me to want to become an aviator in the military. I want to go down the Marine Corps route, first because of my family connections with the Marine Corps. My dad was an infantry officer in the Marine Corps, and my grandfather was also an infantry officer in the Marine Corps. He served in Vietnam as well. And also because the Marine Corps just feels right for me. I wanted to know your opinion on the Marine Corps completely leaving behind the F-18 and going for the F-35. I know the Marine Corps had to replace the Harriers with another VTOL-capable aircraft, that aircraft being the F-35B. But do you think it would have been better for the Marine Corps to go with a different option with the F-18 Block 3 instead of the F-35B and C variants? So I just wanted to know your opinion on that, and thank you for the content. Have a nice day.
Okay, first I'm going to say this dude already sounds like a Marine. Like, we need the knife hands in the middle of that because he's already got, he either sounds like a Marine or a weapons school guy.
Childhood was boot camp.
The dude has got it. And so I wholeheartedly support this endeavor. Rick, what do you think about that?
I don't know. It depends on what the mission is. And the Marines are a different outfit. I mean, I respect them greatly. And if they feel that the close air support from the assault carriers is the best way to meet the mission, more power to them. I'm just concerned that the airplane could have been better if it was strictly dedicated. And I'll tell you, in my personal opinion, the only reason we have an F-35 in the first place is that the Marines needed a replacement for the AV-8B. And if it didn't happen, we'd still be flying F-15s, and we'd still be flying F-22s, and we'd still be flying F-18s because they're good enough today. And then if you need the new stealth type stuff and everything else, you can do it.
Yeah.
But then I really believe that the Marines are a tremendous force on the Hill. There's no question whatsoever. And I'll give you a little apocryphal story. I was meeting with the ranking member of the Senate, the House Armed Services Committee one day. And I asked him, who has the highest credibility when they come to the Hill for the budget? And the guy was named, I think, I forget his name anyway. And he said, that's an unfair question, son. And I said, Mr. Congressman, nobody told me I couldn't ask an unfair question. He said, well, I'll tell you. The Army came up here one time and they said they wanted to buy some of these Humvee things. And you know what a Humvee is, son? He says, yes, sir, I do. It's a military truck, basically. So that's right. The Secretary of the Army says, we want to give this to a small business. And son, do you know any small business automobile companies? No, I don't. I said, I didn't either. And does that tell you anything, son? I said, yes, sir, it sure does. But I tell a story. It says Marines come down with their budget and they say, I want so many airplanes, I want a bunch of rifles, tanks, howitzers, and et cetera, et cetera. And Congress says, yes, you got it. Navy comes down, says, I want a bunch of boats, submarines, airplanes, a bunch of other stuff. You sure about that? Well, maybe we can do a few less of those and a couple of less of those, but that's what, okay, you can have it. Air Force comes down and says, we want a bunch of airplanes and some other sports stuff, and satellites, a couple of rockets, and a bunch of other that stuff. So you sure about that? I said, well, we'll be back in 6 months with a study. And then the Army comes up and says, well, a bunch of tanks and howitzers and jeeps and helmets and all kinds of good stuff. They said, you sure about that? I don't know. What do you give us? I'm sure I'm offending any service I just talked about, but I apologize.
Yeah. For legal reasons, this is still a joke. I saw.
It's funny because it's true.
but I saw on the Twitter yesterday or day before a picture from Divids of a F-35B at Camp Pendleton, like on a road, and they were practicing forward arming and refueling of this thing on a road. Which, when you look at the current conflicts, right?
Yeah.
What's the next war? Look at the Ukraine situation. That's exactly what, because the airfields are getting missiled out, bombed out, whatever. And so whereas I used to scoff it and go, well, we don't need that. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. When they're talking about putting MiG-29s, taking off on roads out of Poland or wherever, that's actually valid. I mean, it's valid. If the Marines can storm the beach and hold this little bit of land, we've got a forward arming and refueling point now, and 5th gen technology on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not in the business of tactics and strategy kind of stuff. I'm just one of the guys that says, if this is what you guys want and this is what you need, I'll tell you what you can have, and then we'll go get it for you. And I used to get these clowns from PA&E, Program Analysis and Evaluation. They were kind of the whiz kids of the Pentagon. And they come down and says, well, why do you need this F-22? I said, I don't need it. You go talk to them guys down at Langley. They're the guys that need it. And when he said, well, why do you have this requirement? I said, I do not have this requirement. You go talk to this. I'll give you your phone number down there at Langley Air Force Base. And they said, well, yeah, but you're in charge of this program. And I said, no, I'm not in charge of this program. That guy over there is in charge of the program. But what we do is develop what they want. And if you've got a problem with what they want, that's the guys you got to talk to. And we had this one group that said, what we need is blitz fighters, where you buy a bunch of cheap airplanes and overwhelm them. I said, well, that's a good theory. Why don't you go down and talk to those guys down at Langley and So you know what? It's nice to be able to have that defense.
Yeah, no, it's the other guy. Go talk to him. So we've got a couple from the audience. Douglas, not our Douglas, but Douglas Rose says, why do large military aircraft, B-52, C-17, B-1, have a much lower crash rate than fighter aircraft? Is it better design, more engines, or crew resource management? They're not doing as cool stuff.
Yeah, their flight envelope is
the autopilot at 1 to 1.2 Gs.
Yeah.
Rick.
I don't know. What do you think, Rick?
In my opinion,
yeah,
it's the mission. It's the mission, for crying out loud.
Yeah, they're not pointing their noses at the ground. Now, B1 excluded. The B1 kind of is doing all its Hayaka stuff, but
if you I rode a simulator in the B1 on the deck, Max Mach for down there, and I wouldn't want to do that ever again because the simulator was a full motion simulator.
No.
That's why I always wonder why you guys want touchscreens when you're bouncing all around and can't try and stick your finger in it.
Or voice. They're talking about voice activated. I'm like, why? Siri can't understand me normally. Imagine with the mask. Hey Siri, Fox 3.
Yeah. Was that 2 or 3? Say again.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I can't understand you.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah. Please wait.
You want jazz music? Here's a sound.
Playing smooth jazz. Yeah. Connor says, thank you, Douglas. Connor says, currently rewatching Band of Brothers. Curious if y'all could share your favorite military shows, movies, Douglas included. Rick, we'll start with you. Do you have a favorite?
Absolutely. Patton.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Shoveling shit in Louisiana. I do a lot of that here.
I love that movie. One of the reasons is, you ever hear of Myers-Briggs test? It develop your personality.
Uh-huh.
Turns out I have the same profile as George Patton.
What is that? INTJ? What is your...
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
But that is a great movie. I love that movie. Next to Battle of Britain.
Sorry. Oh yeah, good classics. Classic movies.
Yeah, I like all the classics and mainstream stuff, but I'll throw one that's a little more obscure. It's on YouTube. It's called
Iron Eagle.
No, except that it's called Memoirs of World War II, and it's a couple up in, I think, Akron, Canton, Ohio, that have gone around interviewing World War II vets, and they put together like really good 10-15 minute historical accounts. And these are just like, like normal guys who had exceptional stories that would never have been told unless this couple would have gone into, and they do a nice job putting it together. But I mean, they put out like one episode a month, and I subscribe, watch every single one. It's amazing. I mean, just listening to these guys it's like it was in Band of Brothers, right? These dudes are like 18, 19, 20, 21 years old and doing just incredible stuff. So that's outside of the main favorites.
You're such a hipster, Gonky. Hipster.
What do you mean?
Out of the mainstream. I'm just got to pick something that nobody's ever heard of.
It's good, dude. You'll like it. Maybe.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you about a film that's not real known about. It's called Called to Duty, and it's about an all-female demo team that bombs North Korea.
You should have stopped at bombs.
Yeah, you should have stopped. Yeah,
they serve as a distraction to the actual bombing force by the F-15Cs. Anyway, Black Hawk Down, dude. What a great movie. The book is awesome. My favorite part, unfortunately, rest in peace, Elvis Wolcott. Is that right? Is it Elvis Wolcott? I think so. I might be mixing two of the guys' names, but Elvis was his call sign. And what I loved about it, watching it in 2001 when it came out, and then watching it today, is they captured how cool this dude was flying his fighting machine. He's been hit by an RPG. He's like, hey, you going to grab that? And they're still working checklists and stuff all the way down. And that stuck with me from that day throughout my entire flying career of keep flying. Doesn't matter what's going to happen, stay calm, all that. So I think it was a great movie. And, Band of Brothers, The Pacific, also a good one. But Douglas, what do you got, man?
I don't know. After what you said to Gonky, I don't know if I want to go obscure.
Doug, don't be afraid of him.
There's a movie from 1947 called Thunderbolt, which was filmed. It's got Jimmy Stewart in it, and it was filmed with the 12th Combat Camera Unit and some other actual units from World War II with real P-47s.
Oh, wow.
If you can find it, I don't know where you can find it these days. It's in black and white, I think.
It was filmed in 47.
Yeah, it's actually called Thunderbolt, and it's all about P-47s. Lots of gun camera footage. Lots of they could really make World War II movies right after World War II that looked real. And then the second one would be what Rick said, Battle of Britain, because I actually knew later in his life, I knew the guy that was the aerial coordinator for that, guy named Connie Edwards over in Texas, who owned a bunch of BF-109s and bunch of other World War II. He bought the airplanes from the movie and brought it home.
Yeah.
Nice. That's the quote. You gonna pull those PCAs offline or what? That's the Elvis quote that stuck with. I remember. But
also,
cool.
Generation Kill.
Another one I liked is Bridges of Toko-Ri.
Yeah.
Flying Panthers.
Yeah.
Top Gun.
Of course.
Yeah, okay.
Top Gun Maverick.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Connor's back. Currently rewatching Band of Brothers. Oh, nope. Wow. I was totally reading from the
I'm having deja vu all over again.
Oh my God. That's a Anchorman moment. He reads from the teleprompter. Max the viewer says, "Hey guys, I just wanted to ask if we will ever see a stealthy fighter that can carry like 8 to 10 missiles internally and be as beautiful as the F-14. You had me in the first half, not gonna lie. Because I was about to say there was a mock-up of the F-35 that had like 10 or 12 AMRAAMs on it, and I'm like, dude, we'll run out of missiles before you'll ever load this thing up. But dude, I don't know if you can ever replace the presence of a Tomcat.
Dude, fourth gen fighters, they're like classic cars, man.
Yeah, they're good looking.
Rick
nailed it in the opening monologue about how pilots need good looking airplanes.
We're superficial.
This generation will never know, dude. No. The standards have lowered so much.
They want to know how big's the screen in this jet. Oh, okay.
Oh, it quit working.
Why doesn't it talk to my iPhone?
Yeah. Can I pair it?
Yeah.
Does it have CarPlay?
Boo.
Will it land itself?
You're too young to be a boomer, Gonky.
Boomer calls me a boomer.
Gonky is a boomer, dude.
I don't know.
Your iPhone 3 makes you a boomer. Rick, what phone do you have? Like, you're on an iPad, so obviously your phone is newer than Gonky's.
I have an iPhone SE 2020.
That's what I have. Right here, baby.
What can I say?
Proves nothing. Gonky, you're younger than me.
Who is the actual? Never mind, Gonky. That's awesome.
Get the job done. Dang it.
Yeah, it's all about utility, Gonky.
Right.
Except when you're off the grid for 2 weeks and then nobody can get a hold of you, sir. All right, moving on to what I believe is probably one of the most important things we talk about is the mental health minute. And Douglas, thank you for the idea on this one. Normalization of deviance. And Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is basically what the name suggests, is where you take deviant / non-standard behavior, and over time, it's just what either you as a person or you as a group accepts. And one great example of that, texting and driving, speeding, stuff you do in your car where it's like you're not supposed to, but eventually you just get used to it and say, well, it won't happen to me. And what that does lead to is in a lot of the mishap investigations that we've talked about on the channel, where it is something that, is widely accepted, but it causes a mishap. And when they go back and dig through it, they're like, well, wait a minute, that was never in accordance with this AFI, this NATOPS regulation, whatever. And whether that's in flying or our daily lives, it can be a situation where it allows ourselves to get in trouble because we're not disciplined. We're not adhering to the rules. And Rick, I want to talk to you about it because it's kind of an engineering thing too, right? The normalization of deviance. Is that something you've seen or you can talk to in your career?
Well, the one of the things that I guess I made part of my reputation on when I was working there is that the ability to see what is the question here. Because when you say normalization of deviance, people get in the habit of doing things a certain way. And most of the time, that's very appropriate for what you're trying to do. But sometimes it isn't because you're trying to do something different and trying to get those guys out of that channel, well-worn channel in the road and say, we're going to do it this way. And here's why was one of the things that I had some kind of skill to be able to do. And I'll give you an example back in I'll repeat this again and again and again. The airplanes in the ATF, Advanced Tactical Fighter, the Abell program, 22 and 23, did not have a requirement. And I eventually had to steamroller people who say, shut up and play and color the book, otherwise you're going to be out of here. And it was something that I just had the feeling that this is the way it has to be. And it paid big dividends. And then I noticed when I was telling you about the F-35 program, the JSF, as it was called at the time, I said, here's the way you ought to do this, and don't put these requirements in it, and don't focus on these prototypes, because you're going to get lost in the process. And they went right back to the way they used to do it, like the YF-16 and YF-17. Those programs had some requirements in them, and it caused some problems in the beginning, but which was overcome. And I learned from that, and I said, we'll get to that. And that's the way I handled it. I said, I know you guys want to put these requirements, and the test guys were the worst in the world. But I said, we'll get to that eventually. And in the meantime, we're going to let them do whatever the devil they want to do. And so when you say normalization of deviation, I felt that the standard practice was a deviation from what we were trying to do at that time. And you have to look at, what are we trying to do here? What's the question? What's the problem? What are we really trying to get at? And if the standard approach is kind of a deviation from what you're trying to do, you got to put a lot of extra effort in it to get them off that standard way of doing business. Checklists are great things. I use one every time I get my airplane. It's a simple airplane. There isn't a whole lot of stuff. There's not a lot of black boxes. There's only a steering wheel and a throttle. There isn't even a mixture control, for crying out loud. So I still go through the checklist. This is the way you start. Here's what you check. Here's where you go around and walk around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I can skip this stuff because that's not here anymore. So I understand what you're talking about there, but I look at it from the other side. Is it still the right thing to do, the standard practice in this situation? If it is, fantastic. A lot of blood's been spilled to get the standard practice down right. But if that's not what's going to happen in this particular situation, go the other way.
Yeah. Gonky.
Yeah, I mean, that's all valid. I would just say, in my experience, normally when I've seen, deviation from normal practice, kind of like you're saying, Mover, where it's like, this is, you kind of go down this road of, well, this is how we're going to, nobody really says it, but it's just a practice that people get into. Is usually like if the money is starting to get short, or if the manning, right? If the manning's not right where you're at. So it's usually some sort of external stressor, or like, like if you're flying the airliner and like you're behind schedule, trying to get back on timeline, you might, sometimes you find yourself like, man, hey, we didn't do that, that. And and it can become a culture thing, right? If
Right.
it doesn't bite anybody, which can be bad.
Well,
So
how about the Gonky? Do you wear gloves when you fly?
no, because I like to feel the buttons.
That's
It makes
normalization of deviance.
right makes me more lethal. But
But that's the point,
I
right?
know.
So there's levels of it where do you
Right.
roll your sleeves up and wear gloves and drop your mask? Because remember, mask on from start to shutdown.
Well, and that goes back to what Rick is saying. You know, you
Yeah.
have to weigh it a little bit. But I guess my plug for normalization of deviance is if you're aware of what's causing you to do this, maybe you can catch it. Like, hey, I you know that, like Rick's, hey, we better do that checklist. You know,
Right.
because eventually you can stray so far and find yourself in a hurt locker, and you know, there's tons of, you know, like Rick said, written in blood, right? And a lot of those are, you go back and investigate, it's like, man, what the heck happened here? You know, because this is not how it should have been done. This is not the normal practice. But over time, deviation was accepted amongst the whole community, not just one person. You know, a lot of times in aviation.
Yeah, for sure. Douglas, you got anything to rein us in on this one?
No, that's as usual. You guys sound like you've got PhDs in psych. I can just retire. The only thing I would add is that it's especially troublesome when you arrive late to the culture that has already deviated and you don't know what the standards are supposed to be, and or you try to get everybody back on track, and you know you get into negative social pressure again. They've got their way of doing it, and you're just a new guy with a loud mouth.
Yeah, you see that in a lot of non-aviation stuff. Doug, you were talking about race cars. You know, just the same thing. Are we going to wear the safety gear?
On.
Yeah, we're going to wear the safety gear. Do we need the safety gear? Are we going to accept the car doing this? You see this in law enforcement, which sometimes leads to you being on the national news because this is just the way we've done it, you know, and all of a sudden it's like, well, wait, policy never said you could do it that way, you know, and it's the peer pressure that you have to overcome to do it the right way. So I also want to, before we wrap this topic up, and I know it's getting late, but you know, my weekly pitch for if you're dealing with something, talk to somebody. You know, 988 is a good number. Mental health is available through that, or mental health counselors. Military One Source, if you're in the military, a lot of squadrons now have mental health counselors. But just, you know, if you see yourself going down a bad path, talk to somebody. Don't let it become something that, you know, it's going to be permanent when you can work through the problem and get help from somebody else. So any reattacks on that, Rick, from your side?
I think that one of the things I've been reading lately is the FAA is coming around to more openness to people who have mental difficulties, not to just take their ticket and round them for life. I've been reading about it. In fact, I got an email from somebody. And it says, if you want to participate in this study, we're going to study what normal reactions are to certain situations so we can see what the spread of approaches or looks or whatever you want to call it to these kinds of things vis-a-vis aviation.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. We've got a couple things from the audience that actually is on this topic. Words of wisdom from my old flight instructor. It's far easier to prevent the normalization of deviance than it is to correct it. I think that goes to what you were just saying, Doug. You know, it's hard to break that inertia. And then John says, as an FTO, which is a field training officer in law enforcement, I had to hammer home that we should never allow NOD when responding.
Sorry.
Oh, normalization.
You got it.
Of course. We're talking about that. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Gonky. When responding to calls, I'm thinking a night vision device. I'm like, well, I know nods. If I had nods, I would use them. Example, not waiting for backup because of overconfidence. And that's exactly right. Not only is it the stuff you end up on the nightly news because you got in trouble, but the stuff you end up on the nightly news because it's an officer down situation. You see it almost goes hand in hand with complacency in some ways, you know, right? Because that's the way we've always done it. That's just the way institutionally we do it. Doesn't matter what policy or SOP or whatever says. And then it doesn't become a problem until somebody gets hurt or worse or whatever. So yeah, that's a good discussion. Thanks, Doug, for bringing that up. I think that covers everything we had today. And Gonky's clock has chimed now every hour on the hour twice, which means it's been a 2-hour tour.
It's my new office, man. Come on.
Yeah. Rick,
What
we
are the
want to
fairy
thank you.
lights up top there? What is it? What are those?
Yeah.
It's simulating him on the moon. We had the
Okay.
lights off last week.
He's on a different moon this week.
Yeah, he's made it to the station.
This is another Valley Design and Manufacturing facility I'm in. So
Okay. Who am I to say?
yeah.
Rick, you're awesome. We
Yeah,
appreciate
Rick, awesome.
you coming out, sharing with us your wisdom and stories. I mean,
Yeah.
dude, you lived an amazing historical career. Like everything is history that you talk about. It's stuff that people are like, "Oh yeah, I know that."
I have been very lucky, to be honest with you. I've been in the front of, like I said, every tactical fighter the Air Force developed for about 30 years. And then I had 3 years with AMC, which I don't want to talk about anymore. But that's okay. They do a great job. Love the guys. Got to fly their airplane. But I'd rather be in the Fangs Out group.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you having me on. I hope I haven't bored you too much.
Oh yeah, no, you come back
Yeah.
anytime.
Oh, yeah.
And it
I
is
got
never.
more stories.
Just go. Just start now, and we'll sit here and wait. I don't. I'm only wrapping this up because it's like 10 o'clock where you are.
No, wait a minute. I haven't seen the check yet. As soon as I see the check.
Hey, Rick, checks in the mail.
Yeah, I heard that song.
USPS has delivered your check. We don't know where it is. So,
Okay. Good.
Anyway, thanks for coming on the show, Douglas. Anything from your side?
Other
of the
than
house?
to repeat the kudos and thanks for Rick. That's just as awesome as it was the
Yeah.
first time.
It's awesome.
Holy crap! What does that mean? That's not a thing. That's just yeah, it is. What is that? What's an IDR? Doug, are we rich?
I'll Google it.
Or what is
Somebody get a calculator.
Can we quit?
Indian double rubies?
Well, thank you, Luca.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
We may be forever in your debt.
That's
Maybe
about
that's what it is. You've just been transferred her debt.
Yeah. I was bought.
Google says it's about 64 cents.
Nice.
We are rich.
We are.
Yes. Gonky, we can retire.
Oh, jeez.
We can go hang out with Rick on his.
We can retire, but we have to retire in Indonesia.
Yeah, I'll sell you a ticket out of Steamboat. Come on out.
There you go.
Oh yeah. Gonky, final words, sir.
No, thanks, Rick. It's awesome, man.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Hope you
Thanks,
enjoyed
guys.
it. See you next time.
We'll see ya.